and I'm the Players' Personnel Welfare and Liaison Officer here at Aston Villa Football Club. I've been in post for 10 years and I love my job. I work with the first team mainly and I'm responsible for their welfare. I also teach them English, and if they don't speak English already, and I find them houses, doctors, dentists, and help them get settled into the club and the country as quickly and easily as possible. Help their families get settled and sorted out so that they can get onto the pitch and play happily without any other concerns. It came about in quite an interesting way. I was teaching in Birmingham and had been doing so for quite a while and enjoyed what I was doing, but I was looking for something else. I couldn't think what I wanted to do. My daughter was at university in Birmingham and she was studying languages, and she worked at Villa weekends as a waitress in the boxes and to earn a bit of extra money. And she said to me one day, "God, Mum, some of those poor players, they've got no one who can translate for them, they've got no one to help them settle in, they're really quite lost when they first come." So I said to her, "Look, you're studying languages, why don't you contact the club and offer some, your services on a voluntary basis?" So she wrote to Graham Taylor, who was the manager at the time, and he wrote back and said, "Great idea, but you're a little bit young, I would probably be looking for someone a bit older than you, somebody who's got some counselling skills," and he started to describe me, really. I thought, my God, that's the job I could do. I would love to do. I wrote to Graham Taylor and said, "I'm an older woman. I'm not 21 anymore, but I've got life experience. I've travelled a lot. I speak 3 languages. I'm also a trained counsellor. Might it be a good idea to have somebody in place to take care of your players in every respect?" And he said, "Come and see me." So the fact that I came along offering my services, and the fact that Graham had recognised that this was something that was necessary prior to me contacting him, it worked really well. Because they've got somebody, when I say looking after them, I mean I don't mother them, I don't sort of mollycoddle them, but I'm there to support them if they need help. And they know they've got that. That gives them confidence, so that when they've come from another country, they know they can turn to me for language support if they get stuck, if they're doing an interview for the television. I sit to the side of them.
And the atmosphere, the ambiance, très bon. Did you enjoy that with the supporters cheering your touches?
T'as aimé l'ambiance avec les supporters?
Oui, j'avais déjà entendu ça contre Manchester City. Quand on me présentait, c'était génial. Et aujourd'hui encore, étant sur le terrain, c'est super.
He heard it once before at Manchester City and he enjoyed it again today. Every Premiership club now has somebody who does a similar job to myself. Every one of us is different, every one of us has different skills. It's important for them that they have somebody to support them in the early days, so I act as a translator and interpreter for the press or any interviews, any discussions that they need to have. And they normally come and they have English lessons with me in my office most mornings, just a very short, sharp lesson, and it enables them to learn the vocabulary that's necessary to operate on the pitch and to discuss with the manager, discuss with their teammates, but also to be able to enjoy some banter in the dressing room. I had a player who came about 4 or 5 years ago. He'd never been out of Africa. He didn't speak any English at all, not a word of English. He'd been out of Africa very, very briefly to go to a European tournament, but apart from that, he'd never been to England. When I picked him up from the airport, he was just horrified by everything around him, horrified by the noise, the language that he could hear around him that he didn't understand. And sat in my car like this for the first sort of 20 minutes or so until he got used to it. He didn't speak a word of English, as I said, and so I set up a course, a tailor-made course for him. And he learned very quickly, he worked very hard and soon became pretty fluent in English, so it helped a tremendous amount to settle in. French, German and Spanish. French is my main language. That was the language that I taught. It's the language that I love. German, I can speak fairly good German. My Spanish is a little bit more limited, but I get by. Oh, it's opened a tremendous number of doors. I didn't realise quite how many doors it would open up for me. And I always say to people that I'm trying to convince about learning languages that to have a language is a passport. I describe it as having a passport which you keep in your back pocket. And the number of times I've had to get my language passport out in my life, just unexpectedly, has been fantastic. One instance that was where a language was absolutely vital was we had a player called Mustafa Salifu, who you've probably heard of, who was from Togo, and he was a player here at the time. He was travelling abroad, and he was ambushed on the bus with the rest of the team. Several of the players were shot. Nobody was able to contact the players individually, and so I was contacted by the club and by the BBC to see if I could contact Mustafa. And Mustafa normally has his phone on him, and he actually had his phone in his pocket on the bus, which was fortuitous because I was the only person to be able to get through. So I was able to report for the BBC, for 5 Live, for Sky Live, after having had a conversation with Mustafa. And I was able to reassure people here in this country that Mustafa was safe. He hadn't been shot. And I was also able to reassure Mustafa in his own language that the club was supporting him and that his family knew he was well. And so, you know, it was an opportunity to use my languages to help somebody, but also to help the media. I started at school. I started when I was 9. At the time, languages were very important in schools. It seems to be less the case these days, which is a real shame. Everybody learned French from 9. So I was at junior school and we had lots of games and songs and so on, and it just sparked an interest really. I really enjoyed it. I think try it, just try it. If you go on holiday, before you go, wherever it is, find a phrase book or look on the internet and just pick out a few phrases. So that you can go to the place that you're going on holiday to, that you're going to visit, and people will realise you're trying to make an effort. It's about making an effort, isn't it? And you can't get to know people without making an effort. It's a bit like friendships. I always do that wherever we go. I just learn a few phrases. I do that with the players here. If a player is sort of sending me a text message, sometimes I'll text him back a phrase in his own language, and it adds humour and so on and so forth, and it just makes life a bit more fun, and it helps people accept you if you go abroad. If you don't make an effort, and a lot of British people are nervous about speaking a different language, but it doesn't matter if it's not perfect, and I will say that to the players here. If you're trying to speak to somebody, you don't have to give them a perfect sentence. It's not like being at school. It really isn't. As long as you can communicate, and it's all about communicating, that's the important thing. I will say to the players, use some actions, use some hands, do some miming, or draw a picture on a piece of paper. As long as you communicate, that's the important thing.